Well, hello everyone. We are so excited that you're with us, and I'm so excited to have my guest here, Matthew Bradbury, and we are going to be talking about all kinds of things, finding the right buyer for your business. We're going to be talking about management on buyouts and transitioning ownership. We're going to be talking about growing through acquisition. We're going to be talking about culture. We're going to be talking about scaling and building enterprise value. And so I'm so excited. Matthew, welcome.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chantel. So good to be with you today.
So let's just really kind of talk a little bit about kind of finding the right buyer for your business, because I think this is really important. And I think that, sometimes the highest offer is not always the best buyer. And we just sold, a multi-million dollar business right now, and the seller really picked a lower offer because he really felt like this particular person was going to grow the business, and it was kind of his baby, and he really liked the guy, and he chose an offer that was a little bit lower. And this was a really cool case where I was able to get two buyers that were both very interested, and it was very interesting to see that he picked the one that had a little bit lower offer.
We do see that from time to time. In fact, I will bet typically get, I don't know, 20 or so offers. And usually the buyer that our client likes the best out of the final five, they're usually in there like right at number three. They're not the highest, they're not one or two. They're almost always number three. And similar to what you see, your business is an extension of your family. It is like another child, another person that you care for and that you love. And you're not going to marry off your daughter to the guy who's going to pay you the most money if he's a jerk or if he's got a reputation for philandering. You want to have your daughter be matched up with really the right buyer. And I think if you take the same approach with marrying off your business, and that you're looking for somebody that really brings the personality and the culture that's going to align with the business that you've built, and they're also going to bring the experience that can complement what is needed to take that business to the next level. Those are the most important things that we see. I will tell you, when you match that, even though their initial offer comes in, say, number three out of the top final five, we will always go back to that buyer and say, listen, we like you the best. There's no doubt your experience, the way you fit, but we don't want to leave X millions of dollars on the table. If you would do X, Y, and Z, we're going to move forward with you. And so almost every time, because they like it too, when they see somebody that they match so well, it's like, oh man, I got to be the buyer. Okay, I'll pay it. I'll do it. I want to be the buyer too.
Wow. So, one of the things that I've been seeing more and more of, and I'd like to see if you have, I've been, people call me and they're like, "Hey, I want to sell my business." And I'm like, and I always ask them, I'm like, "Do you have any kids?" And inevitably, more and more, they're all saying, "I really wanted my kids to take over the business, but they just have no interest in it." And he's like, one guy was like, "I feel like I maybe spoon fed the kids too much. I gave them everything and they just don't want it. They're interested in other things." And, one guy said, "I've got a manager. I want to do a management buyout and I really need help with transitioning ownership." And he said, "I built a company. I want to retire, but I don't even kind of know how to even know if this manager that I'm thinking about is a good candidate to take over ownership, and how does a buyout work?" So I thought that might be a fun question, since I just recently got this, that kind of putting that into someone's mind where, okay, if you don't have your kids, but you might think about having a manager take over, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm going to do it in the context of private equity as well. A lot of business owners are thinking, do I want to sell to private equity or do I really want to give my guys a shot at being the next owner of my business? If our clients are, say, have a 5 million EBITDA business and it's worth, $40 million, eight times five, they don't think that their manager, their general manager of the last 10 years is going to come up with $40 million. So that's different than, say, if somebody was going to convey their business and the general manager could buy it with SBA finance. And we do see that smaller things, say up to a $5 million transaction, that business owner can more likely pull together friends and family capital to go get an SBA deal done and then facilitate owning that business. But on a larger transaction, we need to know two things. Number one, all future growth and appreciation follows the common equity, it accrues to the common equity. And so the way that capital partners look to support a management buyout, and typically a management buyout is where one to three of the key managers can buy 10 to say 25% of the business. Okay. And that would be what my traditional management buyout would look like, but they're not going to put up 10% to 25% of the purchase price. And so what they do is they look at structure, and I'm going to use a 2 million EBITDA business that sells for 5 times multiple or $10 million.
Let's do 1 million because I feel like it just when people are listening, it's just the math makes it so much easier.
It's a 1 million EBITDA business. It's worth 5 times, and um, that's $5 million. What we would look at is, let's say you get $2.5 million of debt on it, 2.5 times leverage of EBITDA, and that leaves $2.5 million of equity. What they will do is come back and say, out of the $2.5 million of equity, the capital partner would put up 2.4 million, and none of the appreciation accrues to the 2.4 million, and they'll put up $100,000 of common equity. And then they'll go to the management team and say, hey, if you can come up with $20,000, you can own 20% of the common equity in the business. So they grow the business. If you can grow that from 1 million to $2 million of EBITDA and then sell it for 5 times or 6 times, 10 to $12 million, that $20,000 is going to be a multi-million-dollar value at the time that they sell in 4 or 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And I think I've seen it where kind of using that same example where it was a $1 million business, we'll say multiple of 5 times. The purchase price would be 5 million. Let's say the capital partner invests 2.5 million, and then the management team could invest $500,000.
Or
And
that for
then
20%.
yeah, and then the debt would be about 2 million, still, but the equity portion is the capital partner plus the management team equals 3 million that they're getting kind of right up front. And then, so then but I love what you're saying is that you can kind of have, different stock where you have, common equity and then you have your capital
Preferred.
partner and your
Yeah.
yeah, preferred and your management team. So that is a really, really good idea. I like that a lot.
Crazy story. We had a spin-off client of a public company. It's about $16 million transaction. The private equity group did this, and they had about $5 million of common equity. They used mezz and senior debt on the other side, and they had $100,000 of common equity. And that one manager, wrote a check for $20,000. And in 2.5 years, that 20,000 grew to over $8 million. And they sold it again in 2.5 years. So to think about how capital structure really matters, if you're the manager and you want to be able to perform and get the biggest bang for your buck, really look at the capital structure that you're agreeing to with your financial partner. Everybody did well. The private equity did well. They made about 17 times their money. But the guy who put up $20,000 and got over $8 million, the president, just a grand slam home run for him.
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit of nightmare stories. So I wanted you to tell like some of the pros and cons of an M&A, and give us a couple of like the worst M&A deal that you've ever seen and what went wrong. Because I think people can really learn from that.
You know what? I'm going to couch it around the question of what is terminal for deals blowing up.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
And I think terminal is when you have a trust breach. So it's so important. You probably say this to your clients too. Every business I've ever run across has something that happened in its history at some point. It could have been an employee issue, it could have been a customer issue, and it could be a bad issue, like something really bad or funky happened. We want to know because buyers are so darn smart. They do so much due diligence that will come out somehow, some way in due diligence. And if it comes out and it wasn't forthright, there wasn't like a presentation of that, the buyer gets spooked and they say, what else have you not told me that you should have told me about this business? A couple of illustrations. We had a client, all kinds of litigation in his past that came up on the background check. He was going to be a partner with a private equity group, and they came up and they showed us like 7 pages of past litigation. And it was, this guy was not good, and that would be one example. There was another example where an owner had an inappropriate relationship with an employee. As they're going through the financials, they see a settlement. What's this legal cost over here? It seemed like all the past employees, they got paid this amount for severance when they left, but this one had a much bigger severance. And, he said, well, I had an inappropriate relationship with somebody I shouldn't have. And they just say, oh, okay, that's a character breach. It's a trust breach. I guarantee if we would have been in front of these things and you manage the mess, if there's a bankruptcy in their past, like when 2008, 2009, business owners got hammered too. You want to make sure that you're managing those messages and you don't have a breach. I would say we have killed over in the last 22 years about 3 deals for an integrity breach on the buyer's behalf.
Mm.
Okay. So we're in due diligence, and what happens? Buyers are like wink, wink, nod, nod. They're talking to you like you're really vested to having them do the transaction. I had a client, and he really wanted all of his employees to be transferred over and to stay with the buyer. That was really important. And we conveyed that. The buyer said, yeah, I'm going to keep all the employees. And about 2 weeks out from closing, most of the legal work, I'm going to say all, but we were in the final legal drafts going back and forth. They make a comment on a call with just us. And they say, yeah, well, we're not going to keep X, Y, and Z. No, we're just not going to keep them. And I remember taking a step back and say, well, that was an integrity breach. And I said, well, we're not selling you the business. I didn't even tell my client. I said, we're not selling you the business, because I knew how important it was for him. He had invested about 80,000 in legal costs up to that point. I just called up. I said, you know what? These guys are not good. They said X, and then here they just shared with us that they're going to do Y. So I killed that deal. And he says, okay, I trust you. We went out, sold it again, and got more money, and it was a much better transaction. So integrity and trust is so critical on both sides of the transaction. Do what you say you're going to do. If you're not going to do something, tell people I'm not planning to do it. Okay.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of something that I just ran into that was the first time that it ran into it. So it was basically a company that gave us their 2023, 2024, and 2025 P&Ls. And they didn't tell us till later. The company in 2023, it was the exact same business. I'm not going to say, let's just pretend it was a landscaping company. Well, in 2023, he had a landscaping company. He had sold that company, but the name was so similar, we couldn't even tell. Like, let's say it was called ABC Services LLC. So you would look at the P&L and it said 2023 ABC Services LLC. The revenue was 2 million, everything, all the numbers looked the same, but it was he sold the company in 23 and he opened another exact company in a different area for 2024 and 2025 and so he had shown us one of the years, but that wasn't the same company. Instead of A, B, and C, it was A, B, C, and D company, and it was such a minor change that we didn't notice it and didn't find that out until the due diligence. So that, kind of coming on to that trust, like these are the kind of things that we get to see all the time that are unfortunate. But again, unfortunately, not everyone has the highest integrity with some of these businesses. So let's talk about one of the things that you've seen kind of like that. Give us one more example that you want to kind of, because now that I tell you that example, people are going to be more diligent and looking for that. Like in the due diligence process, what
The
are
other
some
thing on
other
due
things that
diligence,
you've looked?
yeah. The other and it's not a lot. Again, we probably like you. I mean, you try to get really good clients. If I
Hmm.
get a kind of a smell test or something in my belly that doesn't feel right, no, okay, I'm going to let this guy go. There's something not kosher here. But what could derail a transaction is going to be revenue recognition. That would be the one thing that when you have large project oriented revenues, so think anything that has some sort of a contracting side to it, and they're not really recognizing revenue in the period that that portion of the service is delivered. Somebody might have a 2 or 3 year contract for doing landscaping. Okay, there's a humongous real estate development that's going in. And so there's different phases. There's the entrance of a big landscape, there's common areas. And the very first part is the main entrance. And so you may have a certain revenue recognition during that period, but you did more work, or you had more expense, or I didn't recognize all the revenue for tax purposes and I pushed it over into another year. And so I would just say revenue recognition is one of those things that we really lean in on if somebody has kind of lumpy revenue or project oriented work
Mm. What do you
between
think is
years.
the biggest mistake that business owners make when preparing their company for sale? Have you ever seen like, a seller's emotional attachment to the business and, in their mind they're thinking obviously it's worth this when really it might be worth a lot less.
I have seen, we had a client, beautiful business, about $2 million of EBITDA, and we brought in a phenomenal strategic buyer, about an 8x multiple on it. It was a niche
Mhm.
distribution business. We had gone, I'm going to say halfway through legal. We weren't all the way
Uh-huh.
down, but halfway through legal. And my client, the seller, was turned off by something that the buyer said. That the buyer's a $200 million larger strategic, and he just stubbed his toe. And I remember hearing it in real time. He said it, and it was like, oh, why did you have to say it like that? Because you come across as arrogant and that you're the smartest. And this guy, he was going to have the last word. Okay, that's the what you think. I'm not going to sell you my business. And so that deal goes apart. Where in all reality, he really needs to sell his business. He's in his 70s. He doesn't have a transition plan in place. It was one of the best buyers, great reputation. It was just a slip up of a buyer not being humble. I want to communicate how important humility is in being a really good buyer. Have participated the last 2 years at the Harvard Business School search fund program. So they have about 100 applicants a year that want to go out and buy a business as a search fund. And we see them all the time bidding on our clients. And we'll say, listen, you've got to be so humble, because a regular blue collar business owner doesn't want to feel like they're inferior or not the smartest guy in the room, that someone else is the smartest guy in the room. So I bring that up. It was really a humility issue that happened with my client, that 2 million EBITDA deal. And so I would really suggest everybody try to be as humble as you can through both sides of the transaction. It goes a long
Let's
way.
talk about culture and people during an acquisition. So, first of all, how do buyers evaluate culture during the due diligence period? And how important do you think company culture is when evaluating an acquisition? And would you say that a company could have great financials, but you go, hey, this is a bad acquisition because of the cultural issues?
Absolutely, Chantel. Absolutely. It's the most important thing. Think about how often you hear about bad acquisitions, and it's usually a bad acquisition because of people. It's not that you didn't have two good businesses. I'll give you this factoid after 22 years doing investment banking. There's thousands of private equity groups out there. About 15% are golden. Almost every company they buy does really well. 15% you don't get hurt, and 70% you hope they're not your partner. Okay?
Mm.
Think about that. It's so important for us to matchmake to find the 15%, the best guys. And this comes down to the best guys, they have experience, they're wicked smart, but they're so humble, and they know that the way that you get that business to grow is that it's got to be whatever you just bought, it's their idea. Okay. And they know how to
Mhm.
ask the right questions, like you're asking great questions today. They know how to ask the right questions to the managers to help shape which way are we going to go. And that helps the managers to find their own way to go ahead and execute. And then you can get in behind them and put all kinds of resources behind them to grow that business. The guys that are in the 70%, they're the smartest guys in the room. And they think they know more than that general manager who's been there for 15 years. And they just know. And they're
Yeah.
wrong. And as soon as you start seeing this happening, it's like, oh my goodness, here comes the train wreck. You get two or three key people going, everybody else in the organization, they put their head down. They don't want to stick it out. They're afraid that, bullets are going to be flying. Rhetorical. And it doesn't hit the numbers. And now we got to cut people because we're not hitting our numbers. Like there's a whole sequence of rolling down the hill and watching those things unwind or get hairy.
Yeah, and one of the things that I just suggested someone do is I had them do a survey that was a private survey that went to us so we could see the answers. And the private survey asked questions like, why do you like working here? What would you change? What makes this company different? Do employees feel heard? Would you recommend this company as a place to work? Right. And you can actually get the numbers of what are the employee retention rates? What's the average length of employment? What are the recent departures? Why are people leaving? And, yes, you want to have a company where people are staying, a long time. But at the same time, I will say this, there was a company that, and I'm very big on this piece because I feel like if you have a company where every person has been there for 15 plus years, and matter of fact, I just sold a company like this, that's also a red flag to me because if you have the same people for the last 15 years, every one of you got 40 employees and all of them have been here 15 years, that means you probably have a really lax environment. You're not pushing anyone to do anything. Where's the KPIs? Is there a CEO scale? We have something called a CEO scale scoreboard where we have metrics for every one of the companies that we own, like how many, like our marketing department, how many leads are coming in? What are the conversion rate on those leads? When you hold people's feet to the fire, not to, people stay, the high caliber people stay, but the low caliber ones are like, I'm out of here. So talk about some practical things that you can actually do to actually go, okay, it's my due diligence period. I'm the buyer. I need to evaluate this. What are practical things like I just mentioned that we can do?
Hey, let me suggest this. I only had a half an hour plugged in for our call. So I
Yeah.
have another call literally right now that I've got to hop
Oh,
on.
okay.
If you'd
Okay.
like to have a follow, I mean, I really enjoying this conversation a
Yeah.
lot. It's good to be with folks that are like-minded in how we think about doing what we do. Happy to follow up on another call sometime, but I've got to hop off for another call right now, Chantel. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.